Hi folks, I hope everyone's keeping safe and well. I know cabin fever is setting in for a lot of people, and it's difficult for families, particularly with kids and all of that. So anyone that knows me know I do this World History of Kells thing on Facebook. I do talks and that kind of thing. So what I was hoping to do for the next couple of weeks is break down the history of Kells into short videos and maybe do some live streaming as well, because it's an absolutely fabulous history here, and I know not everyone's into history, but anyone's into more contemporary storytelling, such as Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Braveheart, Vikings, the Tudors, or even up to Downton Abbey. Well, let me tell you, Kells has all of that in bucket loads and more. Per square metre, this area, Kells and its surrounds, is the most important place in Ireland by far. It's hugely influential in Irish history, in British history, and even in European history at certain times. So we should feel very proud to live in this place. And I know we don't know a lot about it, so that's the whole idea of this. As I say, I'm going to break it up and cover the different periods throughout history and focus in on some amazing stories like King John's visits to Ireland and to Kells, the Battle of Kells in 1315, and various other battles and really important episodes like that, even from earlier periods, from the Columban period, massive raid of Vikings here in 951, up to 3,000 prisoners carried away after the Vikings spent the summer here. So like there's something of interest to everyone in it. Yeah, it's not all blood and guts. But our story really begins with the first people to arrive here after the end of the last ice age. Probably between 10 and 11,000 years ago. We have evidence in Gairley Bog, uncovered in the 19th century, of early hunter-gatherers actually trapping giant elk. And we know giant elk died out approximately 10,500 years ago. So we know people were obviously, after arriving here at that stage and moving in along the Blackwater River Valley, which in terms of its length, the Blackwater River and its surrounding valley is the most important run of water in Irish history as well. Now, these hunter-gatherers settled around this area, somewhat nomadic, probably moved with the seasons in very small groups, but thrived around here from about 9,000 BC right to about 4,000 BC. Now, at the time, the entire countryside here was covered in forests. This was a pretty warm and mild climate, and as I say, from the arrival of these people until the arrival of farmers that followed them, it was hugely forested, and people lived along river banks and river valleys and along lake shores. And we have evidence of that. The M3 excavation showed one of the later hunter-gatherer settlements right along the Blackwater. As I say, one of the late hunter-gatherer settlements from about 7,000 years ago. Now, about 6,000 years ago, there was a massive change around here and all over Ireland. Farmers arrived from Britain and Europe. They began cutting down the forests and started organising a fairly sophisticated civilization. We have, again, massive evidence of this around Kells here. The M3 excavations cutting across from Kilmainham right across over to the old Atboy Road. They show they uncovered very significant finds of large buildings built around there around 5,700 years ago. So 3,700 BC, there were large farm buildings being built here and large farmsteads around the Kells area. And that's quite a thing, because there's very little evidence anywhere else in Ireland of this sophisticated type of farming. Now, we have other evidence to show that there was a decline in farming and agriculture in maybe in the millennium, the 1,000 years that followed that. This probably led to smaller evidence around here, but still around the Kells, countryside of Kells, and in Meath, in fact, we are just awash with evidence for these early people. So quite a lot of activity around here, from the early farmers 6,000 years ago right into the Bronze Age, which really hit here around 4,000 years ago. Now, we know the Hill of Lloyd was a Bronze Age fortress 4,000 years ago, and possibly a Neolithic, a Stone Age fortress going back even earlier than that, because Kells is at a very important location in Ireland. It is the crossroads, the ancient crossroads of Ireland. When they began building the monolithic tombs over in Brunaboyne over at Newgrange there. They had already been building over in the west of Ireland, in Rathcrogan, in Roscommon. And there's a road that leads all the way from the west, from Rathcrogan, straight across to Bruinaboyne. And it intersects at Kells with the north-south road, the main route from the south of Ireland into the north of Ireland that crosses the Blackwater. So throughout the early times in Irish civilization, Kells would have been a very important point for information and for authority as well. The Hill of Lloyd, as I say, a strategic fortress, and probably holding command over the Blackwater River Valley and its surrounds. Now, the ancient folklore, the tales of the Leabhar Gaile Éireann, the Book of the Taking of Ireland, or the Book of Invasions, that tells of the early Bronze Age people here, the Tuatha De Danann, who were defeated by the Malaysians. And the Malaysians, we are descended effectively, according to tradition, from the Malaysians. But the Tuatha De Danann, under the High King Lug, is supposed to have begun the Tailteann Games at Tailteann there, about 3,800 years ago. Now, folklore or not, there is again archaeological and physical evidence to say that there was great activity out there at that time. And again, we have around the same time the Bronze Age fortress at Lloyd. So again, the Blackwater Valley, very, very busy. We'll mention the course then in further on down the line when we get more stories about these high kings, these Malaysian high kings. And Kells itself was founded as a royal residence according to the Leabhar Gaile Éireann, which was dated later on, dated to around 1230 BC. Is when Fiacha Findolacus, the High King of Ireland, founded Kells as a royal residence. Now, again, myth and legend, you may say, but at that same time, by 1230 BC, the great civilizations of the Mediterranean were in collapse. And it was because of earthquakes and because of volcanoes in that region. The Minoan civilization collapsed, the Egyptians just about survived. And coincidentally, in the records of this High King Findolacus, it states that every flower and every calf in his time had a white head, and that he was the first to dig wells in Ireland, and also that no corn grew on the stalks. Now, you consider volcanic activity far greater than we had from Iceland in recent years, but volcanic activity that shrouded a cloud over all of Europe for several years. And that white dust and that rain would have meant the flowers would have appeared white, and all the new offspring of the cattle would have appeared white. It's a figure of speech. But in terms of the corn on the stalks, no corn grew because of this. And wells were dug because this rainfall and this ash cloud meant all the surface water was probably polluted. So there is something to say that Kells was founded at a very important time in history, not just in Ireland, but throughout Europe. And these people who founded Kells were very, very important people. From the Bronze Age, we move on to the Celtic period then. The early Celts arriving in Ireland around the 600s BC, we say. Not a big wave or invasion, but small numbers of people, very sophisticated and superior in terms of technology and actually connections to the rest of Europe. So you can imagine the United States has never invaded Ireland. But if archaeologists in 2,000 years' time started digging up Ireland, the amount of Levi jeans, Coca-Cola cans and Ford motor cars would have you believe we've been invaded. So in a sense, the Celts were something like that as well. And they, like previous dynasties, realised Kells was very important as well, and the Blackwater River Valley that ran alongside it.